First, hello, everybody. I am Gil Roth. I'm the president of the PBOA, the Pharma and Biopharma Outsourcing Association. And I'd like to welcome you to the first in our series of webinars for 2021. We have a few lined up for March, and I'll start sharing information about those soon. And we're always looking for topics that will interest our CDMO members. So feel free to connect with me anytime with ideas for subjects and speakers. Today, we'll be talking about how CDMOs can succeed at business development and sales and marketing during and after the pandemic. It was about this time last year that the pandemic upended, well, everything, including how you guys do business. We're going to have a number of good speakers today to explore this issue, and we will be recording today's session. I'll be making that available to you, along with, we hope, a lessons learned takeaway document once we get together and compile our notes. Also, I've got my questions lined up, but I would really rather we tackle your questions because there's a lot of things that you guys want to know about BD and sales and marketing and how we're all adapting and functioning during this day and age. So please use the Q&A function to submit yours. And there's an option to do that anonymously if you prefer. Our speakers today have a wealth of experience in the CDMO and pharma marketing sectors, and I'm just going to introduce them by title and let them tell you a little about themselves. First, we have LaFerla, Vice President of Marketing Services and Business Development at SCORR Marketing. Leah?
Thanks, Gil, and thank you for the opportunity to be part of this panel. SCORR Marketing is a global full-service marketing agency dedicated to the health sciences. In our 17 years, we've developed marketing strategies and branding for more than 300 global companies spanning the entire drug development continuum from discovery and research through manufacturing and commercialization. Personally, I've spent my entire 25-year career in sales and marketing in the life sciences with small and large organizations. And in my role at SCORR, I lead our business development and client services team, all with the goal of helping our clients position themselves for growth using integrated marketing strategies that increase visibility, generate leads, and support business development.
All right. Thanks, Leah. Up next, we have Raman Sehgal, who is founder and global president of Ramarketing PR.
Thanks, Gil. And yeah, hi, everyone. I'm Raman, and I'm the founder of Ramarketing. And despite my accent, I live on the East Coast of the US in Boston. For background, I spent my entire career in the B2B pharma and biotech outsourcing space and had the privilege of advising and working with many companies, 70 plus in the life science supply chain, across digital communications, creative strategy. I'm also the host of the Molecule to Market podcast that some of you might listen to. And I also have huge respect and admiration for my fellow panelists and their businesses today. So it's an honor to be here with you all.
Thanks. Up next, we have Sam Ricchezza, who is the President, North American Operations for Bora Pharmaceuticals.
Hello, everyone. Pleasure to be here on the panel today. I'm Sam Ricchezza. I'm the President of North American Operations for Bora Pharmaceuticals. We're a global contract development manufacturing organization with 3 facilities currently, 2 in Taiwan and 1 here in Mississauga, Ontario, Canada. We just recently completed an acquisition of a GSK facility to add to our global portfolio. We supply solids, semi-solids, and non-sterile liquid products to companies worldwide. We serve over 100 markets globally. And I've been with Bora since November 2019. Previous to that, I have 25 years of experience in the CDMO space, working for various companies, large and small. And I have a background in finance, accounting, marketing, and business development.
Thanks, Sam. Our last panelist is John Ross, who is the president of Maine Pharma and Metrics Contract Services.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is John Ross. I am president of Maine Pharma and obviously the embedded CDMO, which is Metrics Contract Services. I've been in the CDMO space now for a little over 20 years. Sam and I were just reminiscing before this call that we first met in 1995. So we've sort of tag teamed this industry for a long time together. Metrics is a an oral solid dose specialist focused exclusively on novel drug development through to commercial supply. Focused a lot in the potent handling and oncology space. Operating out of Greenville, North Carolina, where we sort of see ourselves having the unique proposition that we can take a product from first in human all the way to global commercial supply under a single FDA registration. So look forward to being part of the panel and happy to participate. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, John. I guess we'll kick off with the basic question. How have you or your clients, Raman and Leah, adapted to the new situation? And what changes did these companies make at the beginning in terms of business development and sales and marketing? And how have you adapted strategically as we're entering year 2, which is like 3 or 4 questions, but Raman, why don't you start and we'll see if everybody can jump in.
I'll try and answer the questions, Gil. So, well, I mean, if you rewind the clock back a year ago and, we all started to deal with the pandemic and kind of get our heads around it, I think the first thing that we saw was, I don't want to say a sense of panic, but a very much oh God, what trade shows have gone. It was just before DCAP, how am I going to get leads? What am I going to do? And there was a real kind of sense of uncertainty around that. And what that led to is actually a lot of companies we certainly see, saying, we need to do white papers, we need to do webinars, straight to a kind of very scattergun tactical approach is certainly the experience that we've had in that time. And a lot of things we've been trying to advise clients and help them with is kind of to understand the why behind these tactics and, and actually, I suppose, impart a more strategic way of actually working together. And, that's, basics like understanding the market, the growth drivers, competitive positioning, understanding your buyers. And both from in the market, particularly in the CDMO space, there's quite a homogenous space at times where companies look very similar in terms of capability. So understanding or taking the time to understand what makes you different, and actually both from a capabilities perspective, but from a softer emotional perspective as well. And then actually advising clients to create buyer-centric content, right? Like, create pieces that are actually going to stick with your specific buyers, right? So, it's kind of let's do a white paper. Well, our main target audience is a CEO of a biotech company. I don't know any CEO of a biotech company that would read a 2,000-word white paper, for example. So that's probably not the right thing to do. And so again, it's about really understanding that buyer and how you're different and kind of going through that. So some things for the audience to really think about, I think, is, that positioning piece is really important. Think about how you can be different and own something in the mind of the client. And don't just copy what the big companies do. So, just because Catalan do something and just because Thermo do something doesn't mean that it's right for your organization. It's probably right for them. So again, try to work out what's right for your kind of audience as well. So, so lots of try to unlock your question there. But I think doing the strategic piece first to really kind of get your foundation in place that lead to a much better tactical output that tends to work well in the long term. I don't know if Leah, you have a similar, you've had similar experience.
Absolutely. I would agree 100% with that. I think, for our clients that we were already working with and we had sort of holistic integrated marketing plans based on strategy developed, it was the goals aren't changing because of the pandemic, but the tactics that we're going to use to reach those goals changed. And so, but because we had the plan in place, we were able to adapt it. And we're firm believers that marketing plans are living documents, right? They're only as good as the minute that you write them down. You've got to be able to flex and change and adapt from a tactical perspective. And I also agree, we had a lot of new clients that were knocking on our door saying, we need lead generation. We need lead generation. And, asking them to sort of step back and make sure that your messaging and that foundation is built, right? Because I can certainly, put some Google ads out there and do some, LinkedIn paid posts, but if I'm driving someone to a website that doesn't have the right message, I think it's wasted money. So it's really, starting with that strategy and making sure that the messaging is there and then adjusting the tactics based on sort of what happened. John, Sam, what do you guys think?
Yeah, I can chime in here because we may not be alone as a provider Leah, to your point about having a plan, I would say that historically, we were a business that kind of had a traditional and pretty common set of tactics year in, year out around which trade shows we were going to attend, where we would place advertising, both digital and print, how we would sort of promote our business generally. And honestly, we didn't really have a plan. And when the pandemic hit, it was evident to us pretty quickly that travel costs were going down, trade show event costs related to that were going down. And for a moment, we considered, do we take all that money and just put it to the bottom line for the short term? But ultimately, what we decided to do was to develop a plan. And so we actually redirected those funds towards a more comprehensive, integrated plan and approach for how do we promote metrics going forward. And I think your point's spot on that independent, the plan doesn't change, you're right, in terms of its target and its approach, but independent of the tactics, we now have something foundational that is supporting us, not just today, but on the go forward.
Sam?
Yeah, I believe that that having a brand is ultimately important. I have a consumer products background, and for us, the way I was trained was always make sure that foundational strategy of who you are can be communicated, effectively to your target audience. And there's got to be the why and the how before you get to the what, which is the tactical. And things have evolved in the last, I would say, 15 years, where our buyers have changed, or buyers in general have changed the way that they buy. I mean, you look at it, with the growth of Amazon and Shopify and online shopping and all of that stuff, it's just so much easier these days to find out what you need. So I think more and more differentiation is really important. I mean, there's, as Raman said, there's a lot of competitors in our space. But, if I really look at it, and, I've been around for quite a while and traveled the trade show scene for a long time and seen, just about everybody that's out there. And really everybody has something unique to offer. We're not one size fits all. And so it's important to identify who you are and how you're going to communicate that so that it's relatable to your buyers.
Gil, just one point, just back to something Leah said, which was quite an amusing thing when this all started. We had someone approach us, said they wanted to spend a load of money on Google Ads. At which point, we turned around and said, your website's awful. You do not want to send people to that website. They were like, we are pitching ourselves as a high-end X, Y, and Z. And we were like, but your website doesn't really reflect that. So it kind of goes back to, I think, Leah's point and the rest of the guys about, get your foundation right first. I always say put your house in order. Before you start inviting people around, get your house in order first.
Especially Sam and John, what's been the toughest part for you guys in terms of, how you've adapted, dealing with existing customers versus, trying to again, go through lead generation, develop new business, not having trade shows, not having client visits? Which of those presents, a biggest challenge? Or again, is it one of those things where you're really seeing it as the opportunity for a strategic reset?
Go ahead, Sam, if you want to go first.
Yeah, sure. So I think the biggest challenge is, behaviors and how buyer behaviors have changed and evolved. And at the very beginning of the pandemic, we didn't know how long this was going to be. We didn't know what was going to happen. All of a sudden, different regions started imposing lockdowns. People were being locked out of the office and having to work remotely, and trying to adjust and adapt. And it's a continual evolution as the behaviors change. At first it was, you talk to people and they were, well, I'm working from home. I'm not used to this. I've never been used to this. And, for me, I've worked, in a remote office and home office for so long, as many of us do. And so for me and for a lot of my colleagues, it was, well, that's weird. What would be weird about working from your home office? Well, if you've never done it, it's a real challenge. And I have to go back probably 25 years to when I first started working in an office to remember that, oh yeah, this was really, really difficult to get that change. And so meetings couldn't happen. They couldn't get access if they were global companies to their other locations. If their R&D centers were somewhere else, they were located here and their R&D center was in Europe or in Asia somewhere. They just couldn't get together. And then the evolution of, well, now healthcare providers are focusing all their efforts on dealing with COVID cases. And so how does that change how companies are doing research and clinical trials? And how is that all impacting? And I think what we're seeing is that still continues to evolve. And how do you continue to monitor that? And how do you get access to people if before you only had their email address and home office or a work office number? Now, how do you reach them if their inboxes are getting inundated with everybody trying to contact them because they're not in the office and you can't call them? And if the only phone number you have is their office number, well, how do you get to them if they're working remotely? And now how's that changing as things lighten up again?
John?
Yeah, I think the thing that came to my mind immediately, Gil, when you asked what's been hardest is, I think that this is such a relationship-driven business. The provision of services in this space is all built on collaboration and relationships. And it's hands-on. And obviously in a pandemic situation, the ability for that hands-on relationship building, whether it's in business development or whether it's in the execution of provision of the services, it's taken away. And oftentimes, a virtual engagement, I reflect if we were doing this prior to Zoom and prior to WebEx and Teams, I don't know how we'd actually manage, because at least we can see each other, we see body language and some of that, we can do virtual tours and things like that, but still virtual tends to be terribly impersonal and very different, I think, than the most effective manner in which generally contract services in pharma deliver in terms of people coming to the site, people having the opportunity to provide oversight, to participate, to engage in problem solving. I think that's been the hardest part. And I think I think we're all still evolving in terms of how to have that virtual engagement be more personal, be more targeted to the particular circumstance at hand. And I think that's where we've advanced in a year's time, probably what would have happened over 10.
Yeah, I think that's a major shift like this at least creates an opportunity. Leah, you were going to?
I was just going to say, I do think one of the, similar to Sam, at SCORR, we have team members that are spread across the US. And so we've always sort of operated in this virtual world, internally collaborating via Zoom, sharing cameras, but very few of our clients were doing that prior to this. And I think one of the benefits that's come from the fact that we're all now in this situation is that we are, sharing video and seeing, the intimacy of the home office and, the dog and the kids, running through the screen, where before it always felt like, oh my gosh, I know that part of my life is ever here. Where now it's, you're building relationships on a little bit of a different level. I can see behind Raman his artwork and ask questions about things. And so I do think that there are ways that we, are benefiting from some of that, but it is, I think it's getting back to the I like you in selling in relationships is hard to do in this. So looking for different programs that we can develop where it's like, let's have a lunch and learn and I'm going to have the lunch delivered to your house. But, things like that, we're just trying to create some of that breaking bread and intimacy that maybe it's missing when we can't all be together.
I know one of our members mentioned he'd only recently started running this very large CMO operation, and he's been virtual the whole time, but said that the coffee meetings and things like that have just been incredibly useful, where in the past you would have been jetting from facility to facility. Now it's the we're going to meet this way, and you're going to have coffee, and I'm going to have coffee, and we're going to talk for 20 minutes, and we make do, I guess. But that question, going digital, which I mean, everybody talks about, we're spending a lot more in digital. It can mean a lot of things. Web ads, more LinkedIn, again, white papers, as you'd mentioned, online content, virtual tours. What are you guys seeing in terms of what works and what doesn't, or what are things that are surprising in that respect?
I don't mind going on this one. I think it kind of feeds nicely on from the last point of, I think what's quite interesting at this particular time, and I think accelerated by the pandemic, is just how in control of the process the buyer is. We all work for anything we buy in our lives at the minute. You can do the legwork yourself, and you don't have to actually speak. You have to speak to a real person, right? And I think, I was reflecting on an article that I read the other day, which said, I was born in 1981, and I'm technically a millennial, which really freaked me out, because a millennial is from 1981. And I was thinking about this, and actually, you have a very digitally savvy buyer that is now in their 40s. So the nature of the buyers in the market, I think, are quite, to your point around, digital tactics and things like that. Google often talks about searcher intent, and more specifically, they talk about be there, be useful, be quick, right? That's the thing, like be there, be useful. So if I'm looking for a particular service, I'm going to grab my iPhone, I'm going to have a look on my computer, I'm going to grab my iPad and look. The real trick in a lot of that is make sure you're there in the first place. So that investment in your digital presence is so important that when your buyer goes looking for what you do, that you are there. And the next thing is, be useful. So if you get that click to your website, or that click on the LinkedIn ad, or whatever it is, then make sure you're actually speaking to that buyer, and actually that you've understood their pains, and that you're effectively funneling them through. And then back to John's point about relationships, I think it's and Leo probably have this as well, coming from an agency service perspective versus, we work super quickly, right? So if someone sends us an inquiry, we are on it within, we joke, we'll probably answer within 30 minutes. Now, I've heard things in the sector where, there's an inquiry and we'll take a few days to get back to you. I'm not saying that's for the businesses Sam and John runs, but, it's a quite conservative traditional sector that's done things at a slower pace. And I think the expectations of buyers now in the market is much higher. So if I send you an inquiry, I want a response straight away. Not only do I want a response, I want to decide if I speak to someone, and I want a friction-free, gorgeous experience, buyer experience. And I think, you mentioned at the start, Gil, about, I suppose rewinding the clock a year ago. And I think there was the reactive phase that we were all in. And I feel like now we're in the more kind of proactive phase, right? We're stuck doing this for the next year or two, whatever it's going to look like. How do we actually lean into this process, right? How do we actually make the most of this process and actually give our buyers, a really, really great experience, albeit virtually? And John's right; it's never going to be having dinner and a glass of wine together. But there is still a way of doing it, and I think that's going to be the challenge for a lot of companies moving forward: is how do you replicate that feeling? How do you delight your customers or buyers through the buyer process? And for people in the audience, like, the technology exists, it's out there. You just have to, I've got to give it a shot, right? You've got to lean into it and give it a shot, and create a personalized experience if you can, and create and make yourself differentiate on that basis, because there's not much else you can do at the minute, I would say.
I think I would agree with that. I think one of the real beauties of digital is the ability to be really targeted and sort of do the micro marketing, and targeting your top 25 potential companies by title. But it's really important that you've got the right message. So the right message at the right time, it becomes part of that, buyer's persona, buyer's journey, and the targeting that can come with some of the digital tactics that are available now.
And I think, I have an experience from this morning, to Raman's point about, instant, a quick response to your customers. I was on a website, I won't tell you who it was a service provider. I was trying to do some data mining, and I was having an issue, and I went to their support page, and all they had was a form to fill out and they'll get back to me. Well, that's ultimately frustrating, and it reduces my my wanting to do business with them longer term, because it's just, if I can't speak to someone right there and then, it's I don't have time anymore. And I think a lot of people are like that. They don't have time for because everybody's so much busier these days.
I think you've seen the chat functionality on a lot of sites that you see more in the consumer world starting to infiltrate into our sector as well. The ability to just, as you hit the site, ask the question and get real-time answers for that reason, Sam.
Yeah.
I will say, as far as instant response goes, I've had at least 18 people register for the webinar since it started. And every time you see me look away and be typing, it's because I'm sending them the login information in that instant that I see the email show up. So please stop registering that late. Anyway, that's neither here nor there.
Going viral, Gil.
It is.
It's one of those things.
The content's so riveting, Gil, that it's actually going viral.
Yeah, I kept trying to kind of give people a little nudge. Hey, let's do this early. But the thing that I'm, that characterizes our sector is the role of trade shows and going to these cities, going to convention centers, or a DCAT experience where we're all working in the various hotel rooms and the different buildings. What do you guys think comes next? I mean, and how are trade shows being adapted or replicated at present, and what do we think is going to be, able to work going forward? What comes after, and will we all be going to shows again, I guess is part of the question.
Well, I think that John's, sorry, go ahead, John.
Yeah, sorry, Sam.
No, go ahead.
I think it's funny, even prior to the pandemic, there's been a lot of discussion at trade shows about the future of trade shows, because trade shows have evolved pretty substantially in terms of going from a place where, you sort of set up your booth and expected a fair amount of walk-in activity from the floor, to one where if you didn't do your preparatory work in advance and set meetings and find out who was going and make an agenda for being there, the booth itself was really just a reason to, having an address to meet at in some respects, and then, go to a restaurant or something for a meal. So I think, from my personal view, I think the whole trade show environment was pretty tenuous to start, even prior to the pandemic. Now, something like a DCAT, which obviously didn't have a trade show floor, but is certainly one of the most prolific industry events associated with pharma generally, that's all about setting up those meetings. And for us, I think, trade shows represented as much an opportunity, or probably more so an opportunity, to reconnect with our existing customers and have a structured and formal way to do that, independent of, just kind of site visits and batch manufacturing participation and stuff like that, versus, really expecting a whole lot of new business to come out of, somebody walking up to the booth. Now, honestly, a walk-in is somebody visiting your website. That's the new walk-in. And, I think in this digital environment, it's easy to lose focus on those types of opportunities that enabled us to deepen the relationship with existing customers that we did in and around trade shows. And I think for us, that's a point of focus going forward, in terms of how do we ensure that in the absence of trade show activity, we're still nurturing those existing relationships in the ways that we should as a provider.
Yeah, that echoes John's points. I recall going to AAPS back in 2010, 2011, and you could see the traffic really decline, and that was across all trade shows. And I remember bumping into someone that I knew, and we were chatting on the floor about, like, well, how come traffic is so down? And offhandedly, this person said, we can just find out everything we need to know about you now through the internet. And so we don't need to come to these shows to find out who you are and what you do. Now we just want to come and talk to you about, can you do what I'm asking or I'm needing? And I think, that talks about a change that occurred, the changes that occurred through Google through around about the mid, 2000s, 2010, 2011, 2012. They made it so much easier to search and to relate content on the internet with search terms. And so that allowed people more freedom to just find what they needed. And it changed the whole buyer's journey. And trade shows, I think, are very, very important. But I think an important distinction is now they're becoming networking events. And it's the opportunity to, let your buyers, educate themselves on their own time in advance about what you can do and how you can help them solve whatever problems that they have. And then you use the networking events to have really solid discussions and create those relationships rather than being at the booth. If what we've tried to do is set up meeting rooms, private meeting rooms where people can speak freely, and we found that those are more effective in terms of developing relationships and actually getting down to, can you do what we're asking for, and what's the next steps in terms of getting either a proposal or advancing the project status to closure.
Yeah, I agree, and actually, I remember a couple of years ago I did an event and I was on stage and with a CDMO. It was their internal conference, and I made the prediction that trade events were going to die in the next few years. And
so it's your fault.
There was a few booing and hisses about that, and obviously that was, we couldn't have predicted the pandemic in that sense. And Sam's right, like all COVID has done is accelerating what was already happening. I can't remember a trade show, with the exception of DCAT, that I've been to in the last few years, that people are like, well, traffic's amazing. No one ever says that, right? I mean, Contract Farmers event's actually quite interesting because it's so small that they're like cram everyone into a room. So traffic always seems big at that particular event, but there weren't many trade events that clients that we were speaking to were like, we have to keep this no matter what. It was actually more for, well, if we're not there, what does that say to the market? It was almost from that perspective. And actually the other part of it, as John said, is a lot of it is existing client relations and actually just catching up with people, and that being the forum to catch up with people, which was useful. And also from a social perspective as well, like, getting together with your team and going out for dinner and having drinks together, that was actually very, very important. I think one thing about trade shows I would say is, a lot of the people watching or the webinar will be sat on so much data from trade shows, from people that they've met, conversations that they've had, and quite honestly, they're probably sat in each business development manager's individual pocket. Now, if people get their heads together and actually maybe invest in a CRM system, maybe look at a marketing automation tool, and actually you're probably sat on a gold mine of data that you don't realize. Because often what happens after these trade shows is, BD people come back, they reach out, try to get in touch, it dies. Maybe they'll keep in touch manually. And like those contacts have then disappeared over time. You could maybe stay in touch via LinkedIn, but there's certainly an opportunity to revisit the previous trade shows that you've been to and the data that's been gathered, put them all together and see if there's some relationships that can be rekindled. And I actually think one good thing about virtual connections like this or virtual meetings is actually I'd say people are more receptive to having a virtual meeting. If we ask someone, have you got 20 minutes to have a Zoom call? Yeah, I've got nothing better to do. I'm at home all the time anyway. So there is certainly, I think there's an opportunity to reconnect with people virtually and use LinkedIn and digital tactics to get back in touch with people.
I think
sorry, Leo. Go ahead, Leo.
Go ahead. Okay, I was just going to say, I think, over-reliance on one tactic, such as trade shows in a plan is, I think, dangerous, right? When we talk to clients, a lot of times they'll come in and we'll be analyzing their marketing spend from the prior year, and they've allocated 75% of their marketing dollars to trade shows. And we always sort of take a step back and say, okay, we really are firm believers in an integrated approach, that there's not one single bullet in marketing that's going to generate the leads or bring in the new business. And so, really taking a step back and looking and saying, am I investing more than 30% of my overarching marketing budget in trade shows? If I am, how am I measuring ROI? Like, let's adjust. And to your point, Raman, I do think, sometimes trade shows are about brand awareness, and we need to be there to say that we're here in the industry. But really, looking at the spend and the allocation and how we can do that. And then I think the other point that I thought of when you were talking about sort of making sure that that data and those leads, your CRM is one of your most valuable assets as an organization. And now's a really good time to make sure that the data that you have in there is good data and clean data, because we are doing so much more from a digital perspective. Use this time to pause and say, let's do an overhaul. Let's look at quarterly maintenance programs. How can I make sure that the data in my CRM is really a value to me and to the marketing and sales initiatives?
Yeah, just on that point, sorry, go on, Sam, you go.
Oh, okay. I'll just say, it's really important. Your website is now, your company's biggest asset or most important asset, and what you do with that data. The CEO of a company I used to work for boasted, at annual board of directors meeting, that our best asset was our website, because it was generating so much traffic and leads and new business. But at the same time, I think it forces you to work more closely with between your sales and marketing groups, because now there's not that separation. It's not sales going off and doing their own thing and marketing doing their own thing, and sales saying, marketing, you don't know what you're talking about. It's forcing you now to really focus on what your buyers are doing and what, where they are in the process and what content is going to get them to actually sign on the bottom line. And so what I've seen over the last 10 years or so as I've been doing this is there's a closer relationship between sales and marketing. The best thing you can do, and this has been my philosophy from the time I got into marketing, was if you're not spending every waking moment in marketing thinking about how you can help your salespeople close business, then you're wasting your time. You might as well go home and not spend any money. And the way to get, from a marketing perspective, the way to get your salespeople to really like you is to give them good quality leads. There's nothing better than creating a relationship between the two groups that way.
Lightning question. Do any of you think you would attend a trade show in August or September? And the secondary question, someone asked, if you got vaccinated, would you go to Milan in November for CPHI?
Yes.
Yes, on the vaccination.
You just want to go to Milan. You just want to get out of the house. But
I'm going with John. John and I are going to Milan for dinner. That's what we're going to do. But I wouldn't. I'd have to say personally, I wouldn't go pre-vaccinated, and that's relative to myself and my own family circumstances. But I think it's interesting what Sam was saying earlier about how behavior will change even when people are vaccinated. It's a really, one of my neighbors has been fully vaccinated, and she was saying that all of her colleagues have been too. She works in a veterans facility, and the behaviors haven't changed at all. They're still wearing masks, still doing social distancing, because you don't know if the other person that you come into contact has been vaccinated. So it could be a situation where many people in the US and many people in the UK, for example, have been vaccinated, but Italy might lag behind because Europe's miles behind with vaccination. So that you could be risking other people rather than yourself, which is a difficult one to think about.
And how about virtual trade shows? What's the experience been? Because I've been hearing the content side works, it attracts people, but the exposition side, the hall, I guess, the floor, it just doesn't capture it. But I haven't attended any of these, so what's your experience has been like? What are you guys seeing?
I think in full transparency, I would say from our clients' perspective that it hasn't been great. And I think, John, you were making this point about trade shows earlier, really doing your due diligence and making sure that you're getting the meeting set ensures that you've got people stopping by the booth to meet with you. But we know even in a good year that we have to entice people to come onto the trade show floor, right? That's why we have the poster presentations there. That's why we have cocktail hours in our booth. That's why they put the food there, right? I think absent of sort of forcing people in a virtual sense to visit, the results haven't been great.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not a fan of them. I think they're a complete waste of money. For anyone listening, don't bother, quite honestly. Why would someone come to a virtual booth and not just go to your website? It makes no sense to me whatsoever. As Sam said before, your website is your prime digital retail estate, and that's the thing you should be investing in to give your messaging and capabilities, et cetera. So, but it's interesting because in the year that we've just had, you've got to try new stuff and you've got to see what sticks, right? Some things, that part of marketing and business development is trying new things and seeing what works and what doesn't. And one thing that I also suggest to people do is look at your sources of inquiries, right? Look at where your inquiries are coming from, like doing, an 80-20, and you might find that actually a lot of your inquiries are coming from, a referral from a strategic partner, a referral from another CDMO. So that kind of, as Leah said before, like you've got a really good time to look at your data in CRM, but not just from getting your data and cleaning it, but actually really look at your sources of inquiries. And it might be that there might be some really creative opportunities within that to nurture new relationships and stimulate new inquiries from that and new leads from that potential route.
So Jim Miller, our industry guru, asks, besides chat on the website, what other digital tactics do you see working nowadays? Or what are some examples of digital tactics that are on the rise?
I mean, I'm sure Leah and I could probably have a field day on this type of thing. I mean, there's loads of things you can do now, and the LinkedIn advertising is amazing. If you're really good at LinkedIn, we had a service client recently that on $100 advert got a £200,000 piece of business. Now, I'm not saying that always happens, but if you're targeted enough and your messaging is right and the call to action is good enough, it can work really, really effectively. So I think that would be certainly things. Obviously, Google advertising, account-based marketing campaigns, and CRM that Leah mentioned. Like, now is the time to invest in that type of stuff, because the money you would normally spend on your trade events, reinvest that in digital technologies and digital tools. And things that we're seeing, Jim, personalized landing pages. Again, we've been doing this for years in our type of business, but why send someone to a generic page? Give them a personalized landing experience so it feels, there's no excuse in this sector, because it's not like you have millions of clients to deal with. It tends to be tens. So you could actually really give someone a personalized virtual tour, a personalized landing page. Hey Gil, I made this specific for you, which makes you feel special. And back to what Sam said before, that's your expectation now as a buyer. That if you don't love me, I'm not giving you my business. That's the way I would look at it.
I think there's a lot of automated tools out there. For years, I've used automated lead nurturing. So if you have a contact us page, make sure that there's a personalized email response on the back end of it, so that within minutes or seconds of them filling out that landing page, that they get an automated response. It's personalized. It comes from whomever. You could target it to by territory, from your salespeople, or from a contact within your company that can handle that kind of stuff, like an inside salesperson. But those are really effective ways of getting back to people very, very quickly. But then don't forget to follow up with picking up the phone if someone wants to talk to you, right? I mean, it's one thing to send an email, but if you take days to get back to them with a phone call, then you lose them. But there's all kinds of tactics, and even in terms of creating, automated workflows and for spaced out over time to say, hey, thanks for coming to our website. Here's some information about us you might want to read about. And so that gives them an opportunity to find out more on their own time.
webinars besides this one? And I have to say, between this webinar and the virtual conference last winter, that brought in new members to PBOA. When I pushed, messages out about this, people started signing on, or they said, we really want to join in time to be part of this event. Webinars in terms of CDMOs, not just promoting what they have, but demonstrating some of their expertise. Is that something you guys see, basically CMOs turning into their own conferences?
Yeah. I for sure, I think thought leadership is in using webinars, podcasts, all of those tactics in order to sort of showcase your expertise. It has been those have been some of the best lead generation tactics that we've had with our clients is, doing webinars. And, there's the idea of, creating, if the virtual event isn't going to, meet your needs, creating this, mini meetings and really targeting your top, 10 clients, potential clients that you want to work with, and creating a series of meetings around topics that would interest them. So I think that there's ways to think creatively, and whether the webinar is, a do-it-yourself type of webinar, if you've got a good contact list, or obviously partnering with the industry publications and the industry sources have been really successful for us, for our clients.
Yeah, I second everything that Leah said there, and I would certainly encourage, again, in the absence of trade events, and encourage a partnership with another publication or contract pharma, do that type of thing, and it's a good way of reaching an expanded audience. And again, I'm looking at this, best part of 100 people here, which is much higher than I thought would be, Gil. Sorry if that.
No, same here. I was kind of floored when I saw the numbers showing up. So,
but the reason that there's so many people here, because you've hit a nerve in a good sense, right? People are genuinely interested in this subject at this time, because your buyers, right? Your CDMO buyers, and CMO buyers are like, how the hell do we get leads? How do we do marketing, right? This is, and I think it's the same for webinars, really understand your buyer, understand their different phases of that they're going through to choose a partner like you. So make your webinars specific and meaningful enough that it will actually add quite a lot of value. And it's not about the numbers in this business. I think people get, we need X amount of people at a webinar, like who cares? If I said to John, you can have 100 people and you get one potential lead, or you get 20 people with 5 really good leads, I'm pretty sure John's going to take the latter. And I think that's the way I would think about it, kind of quality over quantity, both in terms of content and audience as well.
Yeah, I think it requires all great points. And I think it requires another level of hearing. It's almost, you've got to get in tune with what your clients are telling you in the moment, right? I remember, I've been doing a lot of digital marketing for many, many years. I was, as far back as 2009, for reasons kind of similar to this, where we were stuck, we had no money, and we had to do something, and the only thing we could really do was speak about what we could do well. But you got to get in tune with what people are saying to you, and that's why it's important to loop in sales, because they're your front line of what the conversations with clients or with potential clients. What are they saying? I remember very clearly one time having a meeting with someone, and they said, "What's the difference between method development and method validation?" Right? And it was eye-opening. It was like, wait, what's IQ, OQ, PQ? And we wrote a throwaway blog post on IQ, OQ, PQ, and it was the top performing blog post we had ever had. It generated like 40,000 views. So it's really getting attuned to what your customers are saying to you, and then giving them, if you give them what they're looking for, they'll beat a door down to you.
Maybe just to add as well, the webinars are kind of akin to the opportunities we used to seek as providers at trade events, when there was, some sort of curriculum, an educational sort of curriculum associated with the trade event itself. And, you try to get to be a panelist or a presenter around a particular topic. That thought leadership was pretty impactful. And I think thought leadership in this space generally is very impactful. But in a digital world, I think it's easy to become the spammer in this place too. That if you're putting out thought leadership as a representation of your organization, I think it's got to have a certain quality. Otherwise, it very quickly, I think, is going to be perceived as sort of me too and not very helpful or additive to the conversation. And I think in a digital environment, you got to walk that balance between putting something out that actually matters.
I think Sam's.
Oh, I was
Sorry,
going to
Gil.
say my old editorial guideline at Contract Pharma was no shameless self-promotion. That was always a key one because
Yeah.
it's too easy to fall into that. So I'm glad you bring that up, John, because it's, you can demonstrate the expertise without having to say, and that's why you need to come to company X to solve all of your problems.
And use the language of your buyers, right? Don't use your internal language. I mean, you go to lots of CDMO websites and CMOs. We are an end-to-end global CDMO. The buyer's not necessarily looking. It's actually rare a buyer's going out looking. Hey, I need an end-to-end. You guys can tell me better, John and Sam. But has a buyer ever rocked up and said, "Hey, I want an end-to-end CDMO global"? I suspect they're trying to solve a problem first and foremost. That's probably what they're trying to solve. Now, the end-to-end thing might be part of the wider picture of we want a global supplier, we want someone that can scale up, etc. But I suspect the chances are they just have a specific problem that they need to solve or a project that they need to integrate. And I think the use of the language, like Sam said, I think is so important in understanding the words your buyers use rather than, hey, we use this language, so it must be right, which isn't always the case. So.
Yeah, I think what buyers are looking for in my experience is, can they find all the information that they're looking for? Now, not everybody is prepared to buy in the moment when they come to your website. So you can't be too quick to jump on the phone and try and get them to buy today. But make sure that when they're there, that they get the information that they need so that they can self-educate and walk themselves down that path of the buyer's journey to the point where they're ready to go. Yeah, you know what? I think you guys can help me. I want a quote. This is what I need, and how soon can you get me that quote, right? And then let's talk about how we progress, right? Because you need, it has to be authentic. For me, it's always been about authenticity. And one of the things, and I'll give you props, Gil, one of the things I really love about your podcast is the authenticity. It's Gil Roth, and that's important, to be humanized, I think, and not to be viewed as the used car salesman, for lack of a better word.
My hair's all slicked back. I'm trying to channel that energy, but yeah, I understand. Now, somebody did bring up a question just now. It says, Raman mentioned LinkedIn advertising as a potentially effective channel for capturing leads. Would you say that Facebook native advertising has become obsolete for marketing in our industry? I've not been seeing as much targeted advertising for CDMOs on Facebook, so I'd like to know if you think the primary direction the industry is heading is LinkedIn. As an aside, I haven't had a Facebook account for like 5 years. I don't recall ever seeing CDMO ads on it back when I did have it, but I don't know what people's experience is. So LinkedIn, primary mode?
I think LinkedIn's probably the number one. The one thing I would say about Facebook is I discounted it for years. And one thing about it, I think it's actually very effective, is for recruitment at times. You can actually really show off the culture of your organization. If you think of a digitally savvy person looking for a new job, they're probably going to check out your Facebook page. They're probably going to look at. So that's one of the reasons I think, is actually to give an expression of your culture. And going back to Sam's point about authenticity, if someone's looking for a job, they want to know what it's like to work there and what other people work there and what they're like. So that's one area I think I wouldn't discount it altogether, and where even to a lesser extent, Instagram's quite a good platform to show off business culture and the softer feel of the business, rather than, you're going to get an inquiry. Having said that, I've got a good story for you, Gil. The first CDMO I ever worked in, and we set up a Twitter campaign, and this was, it must have been 2009 or 2010. And we got an inquiry from a buyer through Twitter who was looking for a potent capsule manufacturer. I think it was. Now, I think that might have just been a complete one-off, and it's never happened ever since. But it's not completely impossible.
In fact, now that you bring that up, one of the very first member companies of the association I first met through Twitter. It was back when I was with the magazine. I posted a thing about GDUFA, the generic drug user fees, and the social media at Afton Scientific jumped on and said, "What are you doing about this? We need to tackle this topic." He ended up becoming one of the founding members of the association. So I guess Twitter's useful for that too.
So,
yeah.
yeah. I was going to say, I agree with everything. LinkedIn is primary. I would say we do use Twitter for two reasons, one of which is editors and trade media. They're on Twitter. And then the other is, when we were doing in-person shows, hashtag CPHI worldwide is another tactic that we use around Twitter. And I completely agree with the internal sort of HR recruiting use of Facebook.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how social media buying changes over time, because our buyers are getting younger and younger.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, for me, I'm off of Facebook. I don't use Facebook other than we do some stuff on it, for the business. But, Twitter has never really generated any business. And I see LinkedIn has really grown over the last, say, couple of years. But that's interesting to say, like, what's the role of Instagram in the future? As our buyers get younger, right? Because there's definitely demographic shifts in who uses what.
Yeah.
Start doing influencer pictures from your facilities and stuff. Now, the one thing that's really come up, and one of our members just asked this one. I hope you don't mind if I keep you here past 1 hour. By the way, I'm sure people will drop off, but we're recording the whole thing, and we'll share with everyone. Virtual site tours. One person asked, do you anticipate that those will be a trend that continues after COVID subsides? Or do you think there'll be a push to resume in-person site visits? Or what do you think a hybrid of that would look like, with maybe virtual first and then coming into the site? What's your take on how virtual site tours have worked so far and how they might work post-COVID?
I could take an initial stab at that. I think virtual site tours are here to stay. They're super convenient. I think a lot of us have gotten really adept at handling them, whether they're for purposes of audits or just general tours. They're easily customizable. So I think they're here to stay. They're tremendously efficient. That said, I do think buyers want to see the site and meet the broader teams and things like that. It might just be my age and my slowness to adapt, but I go back to something I said earlier, just around relationships. I think the relationship reaches a different level when you've met people in person. And I reflect even on, we've done a lot of interviewing during this time, and there's been candidates that we thought came across great on Zoom, and we met them in person and we decided not to hire. And then we've had others where it's gone the other way. It's kind of like, the Zoom didn't go so well, but man, on paper they look really good. And those that we, background checked on them a little bit just through networks, said, yeah, you should consider this person. We meet them in person and it's a different point of view. So I think if we can get back to on-site visits, I think there will be a place, but I guess I see the hybrid approach going forward.
Yeah, I agree actually, and I think that it might be part of the buying decision process to get to that in-person site visit. So I think the savvier and more digitally savvier the buyer, you're probably going to have, hey, as part of the process, hey, can we do a virtual site tour? From the 4 we're going to select 2 partners to go and visit. So rather than visit 5 sites and have a look historically, I think it will be part of the vetting process. And I think this CDMO's preparation and ability to deliver that virtual tour and give a sense of a culture of the business as well as the capabilities is really important. And I think that's going to be a challenge, to do it in a slick way that represents the business and have real people on it. And then I think the vetting, that might be part of the vetting process.
Yeah, I think video's here to stay, regardless. But I think, again, going back to the authenticity, I think the virtual site tours don't have to be overly slick or overly produced. I think, watching someone with maybe an iPhone walking down the hall, but as long as it's a subject matter expert that's doing that tour, you can have that back and forth even on an iPhone. And I don't think that matters so much anymore in terms of the slickness or the production value of the video. People are used to, TikTok, YouTube, and seeing all kinds of stuff that way. So, but I think at the end of the day, you still have to be on site, for the final decision. People in my mind, or at least I would want to be on site to actually see the place.
I have to tell you guys, one member actually told me they've closed business with a new customer who's never been to the facility. It's all been virtual.
Oh, sure.
And, again, I'm with John. We're sort of that old school where you still want to see and be there.
Sure. We've had the same, Gil. We've been selected for work without an on-site visit during COVID-19. So it certainly can be done. But I do think that the general preference will be ultimately to, press the flesh, so to speak.
Oh, I've got a question coming. Yeah, the same sort of question. Well, do you think companies will reduce the number of events they participate in next year? And I'm under the assumption we're not actually going to have any in-person stuff this year, maybe, limited local things. But anyway, do you think companies are going to use this as a reset? And John, you brought that up at the very beginning that, it's always been trade shows are on the way out. Is this really where you guys are going to strategically pick and choose what to attend?
I think we will be more selective, yes, because I think we will feel like we can adequately cover, our targets without sort of making sure that we've got a stake in the ground at every event. And I think the notion of being conspicuous by your absence will go away.
That was a very early thing for me. A few years into my time, so early 2000s, some major company wasn't in bio, and I thought this meant something was going wrong, and they were just like, it's not worth it. We just walked the show. We didn't need to have a 200 by 200 booth or anything. So yeah, it's certainly a choice that you guys have to assess.
I think measuring marketing ROI is really important, and trade shows, and traditional marketing tactics have a lower ROI than more efficient, a combination of digital and traditional, and like everyone else, I've seen where we've won business, in past organizations, we didn't even see them on video. It was all phone calls and email. And it just depends on where they are, how much of a need they have, and how well you fit that need as compared to anyone else out there. So, as far as going to trade shows, I'm going to be reluctant to do so this year, only because it's not going to be even across the world as to who gets vaccinated and when and how, and even if you're vaccinated, I don't know if the data is all in about saying that you're bulletproof and you won't catch it or you won't transmit it. So we'll have to see.
Customers will drive it also. If the Pfizers and Mercks and everybody of the world are saying we're not going to send our employees,
Right.
Yeah. So great question, especially for coming from my background at contract pharma. What's a better investment, print or digital advertising? And I will note that contract pharma's digital manager is somewhere on this call right now. So this might have been submitted by him, although it says it's anonymous.
What a marketing firm's answer.
It depends on your objective. Like, that's another thing. Like, if you are trying to be everywhere and wanting, everyone to see you, then a combination of both might be right. I mean, I've come from a digital background, so I'm always probably similar to you, Leah. Like, we always have a digital first approach. But that's not to say, something quite funny happened in the last 2 days. I got a newsletter in the post from a membership group that I'm part of. It's a agency owner membership group, and I sat and read every single page of it. Yeah. And I said to my wife, isn't this bizarre? Like, I would not have read it if it was an ebook, but I sat and read it. Now, that might be because I'm getting older, I don't know, but I think there's a place for print but not necessarily in the media sense. I think you can still communicate with people via print, and you can send them things that give them a sense. Say John said, he won a new contract without seeing, John then potentially sends that buyer a handwritten note saying thank you for selecting us. That will make that client feel $1 million, you know, in terms of this company cares about me. Such a little touch. But again, going back to what I was saying about like, how do you personalize the experience through other mediums? That's how I would use print. And Lee, I don't know if you completely disagree.
I mean, no, I mean, I think it all comes down to the strategy and where you are as an organization, right? What I'm going to prescribe to the Catalents of the world with great brand recognition is different than what I'm going to prescribe to, you know, somebody that's a smaller organization. So I really do think it needs to come down to strategy. When you talk about tactics, it really needs to be driven by what's the strategic objective. Who's the audience that we're trying to talk to? Are we going for brand awareness versus lead gen? And those are all the things that we weigh when we're putting together that plan.
Yeah. And there's no silver bullet. I think you said something similar before, Leah, and I don't think, you know, for the people watching, you know, my organization or Leah's organization, like there isn't a one size fits all approach that's going to work for every organization or one tactic that works. And I think go into it with realistic expectations if you start investing in marketing and things like that. And so that's just something for people to just be realistic about. There isn't, unfortunately, there's not one thing that works.
No, there's no silver bullet and there's no cookie cutter approach, right? Again, it comes down to understanding, you know, we're firm believers in doing the strategy first, understanding the goals and objectives overarching of the organization and how marketing can come in and support those and how marketing can support the BD and the sales team. So really customizing based on what we're trying to accomplish with our clients.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like the biggest lesson has been for CMOs to really, you know, take this time or have taken this time to better understand themselves and to figure out what the message is and then how to approach it in a landscape that's completely different than what we were used to. So I'm glad we have something for the little takeaway note that we're going to distribute to everyone. My last question, since we don't have any other questions coming in from the attendees, A, closing comments, but B, how long did it take you to come up with your best Zoom angle to figure out, you know, what looked good on camera and where all the chins show up? Because that's part of the reason for the beard. So Leah, you shoot. You're first.
Well, I did share before everybody joined that I prefer Zoom over Microsoft Teams because Zoom does have an enhance your feature filter that sort of smooths out the fine lines and wrinkles. So, you know, again, we were using it internally, so completely comfortable and try not to spend too much time looking at myself, but instead making eye contact with the people that I'm talking to. So, you know, I'm sorry, Gil, I missed the first part of the question.
Oh, just last comments.
But yeah, no, I mean, I think, you know, thank you for this opportunity. I think the discussion was really valuable. And I think, you know, we're all facing similar challenges. And, you know, for me, one of the things that, you know, has in-person events not happening is that, you know, sharing of best practices and collaboration and brainstorming. And I think that is where things like this can be really beneficial to the organization. So thank you.
Thanks, Leah. Raman?
Yeah, no, well, yeah, obviously, Gil, thank you for inviting me to be part of the panel alongside the rest of the guys today. And I think you know, we've discussed lots of great stuff today, and I think some key takeaways for people, you know, as I said before, you know, get your house in order before you go into tactics is something that I would really say to people. You could spend a lot of money just throwing money at ads and tactical stuff without getting that kind of fundamental stuff. And, you know, to what John and Sam talked about, really think about how you can develop relationships in a virtual world. Like, I think being proactive about that now, because I don't think any of us actually think there's going to be many trade events, if any, this year. So don't get to the end of the year and think, oh, we should have thought about that. So I would certainly encourage to think about how they can create a really good like buyer experience and customer experience virtually. And my Zoom background is real. Yeah. So.
How about you, John? Last thoughts and you know, your best Zoom angle?
Yeah, well, I guess you can tell from my appearance that I haven't figured out the best Zoom angle yet. Even though apparently we have these awesome backgrounds that I'm supposed to put on here for time to time for branding purposes, but which one of my fellow panelists will slap me for later, I'm sure. but anyway, you know, I do think we're honestly lucky in this space to have experts like SCORR and Ramarketing that are actually sector experts in a sector that, you know, wouldn't obviously necessarily have one or two in this case. So I think that's been particularly helpful. And I think sort of the next frontier for us is really how do we ensure that we take that more personalized approach in a virtual environment, because I think it's easy to create videos and have a very standard uniform kind of application, but ultimately to replace that in-person experience that we used to have, we need to get more personal in the digital, more virtual platform.
Sam, final word.
Thank you very much for including me in this. It's been a real pleasure to share thoughts with a great group. John Ross, I've known for, geez, forever, since I got into the space, and SCORR and Ramarketing. Like John said, they are the the industry leaders, in marketing for us. For me, I think the biggest thing, the biggest takeaway I want people to go away with is, don't rest on your laurels. Things change all the time. Continually ask questions, continually challenge your assumptions and your paradigms in terms of.
Did Sam freeze or is it just me?
I think he might
I
have.
think he froze.
Oh my God, that's a perfect
It's a
moment to end on.
cliffhanger.
I'm so
It
sorry,
looks similar.
Sam, but your audio's frozen, your picture's frozen. On the strength of that, and since we've gone about 15 minutes over, I just want to thank all of our panelists and all of our attendees. We'll have a recording of this available soon. We'll just edit out Sam's frozen features there. And we'll be back in a few weeks with our next PBOA webinar. So thanks so much, everybody.
Great.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Stay safe, guys. Bye.
Bye.